Hey everyone, it's Matthias. I know I say this every time, but I am so excited about today's video. Julie Rodgers is a blogger, a leader in the gay Christian movement. She has written for Time magazine, all kinds of places, and she's just amazing. I've been a really big fan of her for a long time. I've never met her, so this is the first time I've gotten to meet her, and I think you guys are going to love our conversation. So without further ado, we'll jump right in. Hey Julie, how are you doing today?
Wonderful. How are you,
I'm
Matthias?
doing well. Thank you so much for coming to join us.
Yeah. No, I'm excited to chat.
Yeah,
Thanks for having me.
yeah, totally. It's been really fun to follow your journey in the past couple years, and just kind of wanted to talk about that a little bit. And like a couple months ago, you posted a big piece in Time magazine about your time at Wheaton. And for people who aren't familiar with you or don't really know that story, like, do you think you could maybe first just give a quick summary of all that went down with that, and then we can kind of go from there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Wheaton College reached out to me in the summer of 2014 to go work with students in their chaplain's office to be an associate chaplain, and I would be supporting LGBT students on campus, but also working with students struggling with a range of questions and issues. And I loved it. It went amazing.
Yeah.
They knew I was an openly gay blogger when they hired me at the time. And so students really just felt like it was a safe place, that I had created a safe place in the office. And it was a real statement to LGBT students to say that they're wanted there, that Wheaton is a place that wants to support them. And very quickly, within the first week or two, the president pulled me aside to say, hey, we're getting feedback from some alumni who have read your tweets, and they're really anxious about us having a gay Christian on staff. And a few weeks later, they asked me to write a sort of personal statement that would say, I'm not, really gay. I'm just same-sex attracted, and I'm open to the Lord healing me in ways that could lead to a marriage with a man. And, that kind of continued throughout the course of the year. At the same time, it was going amazing with students,
Right.
and they were just, coming and sharing and opening up, and they were learning so much, and I was able to speak in classrooms and develop really, really wonderful, meaningful relationships. And it got to a point where the president called me to the office at the beginning of the spring term and said, we know your ministry's going amazing on campus. We know students are really benefiting from your presence here. But your presence is taking a toll on the offices of admissions and advancement, and people are writing and calling and saying they would never send their kid here with somebody like you on staff. And so he just said, I want to suggest the possibility that you could resign, and I could commend you for ministry opportunities elsewhere. And he said, I've always said if my presence here were to take a real toll on the college, I would remove myself from the institution. And I know you want what's best for the college. And I just kind of sat with that for several months and got to a place where I felt like what was happening at Wheaton was confirming some of my fears that had been there all along, that traditional views of Scripture were often rooted more in fear and more in homophobia than sincere beliefs about marriage.
Right.
And so, I got to a place where I didn't feel like I could stay at Wheaton in good conscience, and made the hard decision to leave. That's a little bit. That's a brief recap.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I can imagine that'd be a really, really difficult position to be in. And like, oh gosh, wow.
Yeah, I just miss the students.
Oh, yeah. I would imagine. I know, like in my life, like I went to a conservative Christian undergraduate school. I went to John Brown University, and like how helpful that would have been to have someone just to talk to, and who knows the journey. Like that would have been so incredibly helpful. And yeah.
Hope more following Wheaton's footsteps in hiring somebody like me. I think it was a courageous step.
Oh, absolutely.
At the fold, and I don't think they were quite ready.
Right.
But I am still just so thankful that they even took that step in the first place, and I hope more follow.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So you kind of wrote about in that timepiece about how, I mean, I feel like you stayed kind of quiet about it for a while. And in the timepiece you wrote something along the lines of you had felt like in your silence you were starting to kind of live into these systems of oppression that were kind of co-opting your narrative of, because at the time you were side B celibate, and you've since changed, right? It's kind of gone over to side A, yeah. But at the time you were living into a side B narrative, but from what I understand, it felt like you were feeling a little bit co-opted, and that narrative was starting to take an approach towards LGBT people that you didn't want. Like, can you talk about that a little bit more and like what that was like?
I was side B because the communities I came from sort of insisted that you stay conservative on these issues if you want to belong. And I really wanted to be accepted, and I really loved Jesus. And so I was like, okay, I'll do celibacy. I'm in.
Right.
And I felt like my goal was to really help people understand, hey, I didn't choose to be gay, and my friends and I, we couldn't change it. And we have real needs for intimacy and relationships and connection. And I was trying to help them understand the idea of a whole entire life, of not having anybody to sort of have a shared history with, a place to have intimacy and to be known. And I felt like what a lot of the organizations wanted was for me to really be the gay person that promoted like family values.
Right.
And so I had one goal of making safer spaces for LGBT people. And I felt like other people weren't really hearing that as much as they just needed somebody to sort of like be a mouthpiece in many ways. And that was just really disconcerting to me. And after I left Wheaton, I didn't speak out for a while because I knew I was too angry and hurt, and I thought nothing productive is going to come out of this.
Right.
But over time, I began to feel like, a lot of times people in positions of power will call for unity, and unity means those who are minorities or those who hold a position that the majority don't are quiet.
Right.
And if silence was what had to happen, silencing minorities was what had to happen for unity, then it just seemed like something was off and something was unfair. There's so many people that have the exact same experience I had and who right now are probably being called into somebody's office somewhere or dismissed from some job or, invited to leave a campus community because of these views. And I just felt like I had a responsibility to speak up.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and it's a really brave thing to do, to step outside of that kind of, it can be kind of comfortable in that silence, and just to stand up and be that person that's starting to stick out a little bit. Like it's a difficult thing.
I feel like it's important for reconciliation, though, for everybody, because we can't have reconciliation without both accountability and honesty.
Right.
And so I think people like you and people like me and Matthew Vines and Justin Lee and so many others speaking up and sort of taking our place at the table and saying we are Christians and we are a part of this.
Right.
Let's talk. Absolutely. I feel like that is the move toward unity that I think feels scary to a lot of traditionalists, but is so important for us to really create safe spaces where everyone belongs.
Totally. Yeah. I just wrote about that on Monday about because I got to spend some time with the theologian James Allison.
He's amazing.
He's so amazing. Yeah, but he was talking about how he feels like kind of our generation is like the first generation that really gets to start defining what it means to be gay within church communities, within faith communities, because the battle is still there, but it's starting to not quite be there as much, and so we get to just start living into being gay. And in our faith communities, and he kind of called us into that of just live your lives and don't hide, and it's terrifying in a way.
It's so important though, because we're actual Christians, and people get to see that and hear that now because of Twitter and social media and all the change that's happened, and they get to meet people like you, which is so amazing, and so we do get that opportunity, I think, to define this for ourselves rather than Christian leaders sort of, rejecting or kicking out LGBT people and then telling a story about us that just wasn't true.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
That's exciting.
It is exciting. Yeah, it's like, oh yeah, like this is our time kind of, and yeah, which is so cool. But yeah, yeah. So you also talked about, and you also talked about this in the little introduction that you gave, like how you kind of felt like you were having these hunches confirmed that like the traditional views of marriage were more rooted in fear and homophobia than like sincere beliefs. Maybe not sincere beliefs, but then like readings of scripture, and that made me really curious. Like, I mean, that's a hunch that I feel like a lot of us Side A people have. But I'd be curious to hear more thoughts around that, of kind of what that fear might be, and how you saw that kind of play out, being kind of on the inside.
Yeah. I think a lot of it for me comes from the way the narrative and sort of the goalpost has changed so much through the years. So when I initially came out when I was 17, the narrative was you had to change to be accepted. You had to become straight. Prior to that, it was you were just dismissed altogether, right, and you were totally rejected and kicked out. So it was like we went from being kicked out to having to change, and then that was sort of like science and all these stories of the damage instructed the church to say, okay, they probably aren't going to be able to change. Mm-hmm. Well, now be celibate. So you need to be celibate for the rest of your life. And this is the only group of people in the history of ever that have had to, undergo sort of mandated celibacy. Even right. Priests choose celibacy freely.
Right.
Because many just choose not to go to the priesthood if they know that that's not a life they can live. Totally. So then we have this new thing, and it began to feel like it was just sort of another way to sort of quarantine the gays. Mm-hmm. And that isn't to downplay the importance of celibacy. I definitely don't want to minimize that. Right. Many people are going to choose that path. Many people, gay and straight, are going to end up single long term. And I think the church needs to be a place where everybody finds family. Yeah. So I don't want to minimize that. But it did begin to feel like the way, the systematic theology was sort of airtight at one point, and then it changes to this, and at every point it's changed. Anything that will keep us from being able to just be healthy, loving same-sex couples who embody the love of Christ in our relationships. And it just seems to me like the unwillingness to even entertain that possibility, and the fact that, a celibate gay who could totally sign off this on the statement of faith at Wheaton, and by every standard was living into what they called all their employees to, the fact that I still experience so much discrimination, it just made me start to say, I don't think this is about their beliefs about marriage and sex. Mm-hmm. I really think it's about the fact that I exist as a gay person, and there's just an extra level of fear and scrutiny there.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's so true. Because like even as you said in that timepiece, like it wasn't so much a problem about what you believed, but it was a problem with who you were. Mm-hmm. And I think that so often comes into play, I think, in these conversations of where the language is you're welcome, you're accepted, we want you here. But then once you arrive there, and it's like, okay, well, you have to change this, you have to use this language about yourself, like all of this. And it turns out like, wait a second, I'm not actually welcome here. Like, in my fullness. Yeah.
Yeah. At one point, the president asked where I was receiving accountability for chastity. And I just thought to myself, are there any straight employees at the Wheaton College who are being asked where they're receiving accountability for chastity in the president's office? Like, right. This is about me being gay.
Right. Totally. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So, what are you up to now? Like, you're done with Wheaton. You're moving on. Like, what's in the future for you?
Well, I'm enjoying the freedom of not being censored for the first time in my life. I took some time to just kind of heal and to connect with Jesus and to just continue to grow and sort of recover and invest in my community. And then I'm continue to do writing and speaking and just pastoral care sort of like on the side. Yeah. So all of it's sort of freelance right now. And I'm going to continue to give that a shot because I think there's a real need for that. And I'm still paying bills. So as long as that happens, then I'm just going to continue sort of being one of the leaders in this movement to create safer places for LGBT people in the church.
Yeah, That's awesome.
Such a joy. Yeah. I feel very, very thankful.
Of course. Yeah, totally. Yeah, I know. And I know there are so many people who are very thankful for your voice in this work. And
That's kind of you.
definitely
Thank you.
needed. Yeah, of course. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us. And
Totally.
really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It's great to meet you.
Yeah, likewise. Yeah, I've been wanting this to happen for quite a while. So, yeah, but thank you.
All right. Cheers, Matthias.
Cheers. There you have it. Make sure you go check out Julie's blog at julierodgers.com, Julie-Rodgers, RODGERS.com. Her blog is incredible. Subscribe to it, and we'll see y'all later.